Hey everybody. I had a great opportunity today to spend some time with Sensei Marcus Davila, who is really one of my teachers and somebody who I really appreciate a great amount. He spent some time with me today. We talked a lot about the upcoming videoing project, to video a series of principles in application in a kind of a curriculum-based mode, something that could be dropped in kind of in place of training of the three fundamental blocks, Jochuge, high, middle, low, as well as could kind of be plugged in anywhere where you would do something like Sandan-gi as a training platform, or Kiso Kumite, or those kinds of things for two-man work. Anyhow, we spent a lot of time today talking about how to prepare that material and organize it better for consumption outside of this dojo. And some things came up that I wanted to share, and I'll try to move along a little more quickly. But what we talked about today was how I presented this this visual about principles and examples, and really what this is meant to say is that principles can really only be understood well through their examples, and examples can only be explained well through the principles that guide them. So or accurately or with any amount of value in the explanation. So it's a bit of a cycle, and you may have to, either yourself or for your students, go through this process a few times. Attempt to explain the principle, give an example, see if they understand the example, go back to the principle, and ultimately the goal and the real value of principles over examples or over being technique driven is the idea that with one principle you can develop or understand or create many examples of that principle. And so that's the value, and it's the opposite of what a term I took from another one of my teachers, Guru Mark Wiley, is the idea of a one-off. A one-off is a thing that you might look up in your Rolodex and hope it shows up in that moment. When somebody grabs me this way and their foot's back and they turn and they come with a straight punch to the nose, then I do this one thing. But if their foot is the other way, then I perform an entirely different technique, and I have to remember in the moment to do the right thing. That would be very kind of technique-centric and not what we're talking about. We're talking about finding ideas and concepts to implement in the training that we can learn how to develop skill around. And so skill is where we then move to from that discussion. So, if it's well understood that principles need examples, and examples are powered by the principles that were used to create them originally, it's important to understand the difference between, an experience of or exposure to a principle versus a skill that's driven by that principle. So I'll give you an example, the example of proper hand. So if you've read the book and you understand proper hand, you know that idea is that if the attacker's right hand is incoming to me, I will typically engage with my left hand so as to not engage with my right on the inside gate and self-flank. That's the concept of proper hand. Now, the experience of proper hand is simply letting people feel and see what that looks like. So usually the experience of proper hand is something like my training partner chases me down the floor with alternating punches. He punches right, I block left. He punches left, I block right. And so we continue to alternate. I know which hand is coming next. I do it with my lead leg. It's very clear what's going to happen. I would not consider that gaining the skill of proper hand. I would call that the experience of proper hand. So as it relates to the skill of would be using the idea, the principle, experiencing that example so people cement the concept in their mind, and then from there what we should do is make sure that there are skill building drills. And skill building usually, in the way that we talk about it, means the ability to pull it out from a random situation, knowing from body cues or body positioning what's about to happen, being able to develop the experience to figure that out and understand that and do the right thing in the right time. So the skill of proper hand would be us squaring off in our middle frames this way, with my attacker randomly reaching out to my center to touch me in the sternum and me attempting to apply the proper hand, and the attacker giving me varying speeds and body language so that I could develop the skill of reading their body and applying the right motion in the right time. So the experience of is simply walking down the floor, touching the right hand to the left hand and the left hand to the right hand so that we're making the proper hand scenario. But the skill of doing that is something entirely different. And so that's really the goal, is the skill. The example is not really the goal, but the principle drives both the example and the skill building drills. So if we expand the concept and say the real cycle that we want to work through in our teaching and our curriculum development is be sure we understand our goal, help to ensure that the student cognitively is aware of what's driving the training so that they can self-correct and so that they can be aware of what the test criteria are, and then experiencing the skill building drills and building those skills in their body, and then being tested on those skills, so that the teacher can then determine whether or not they're ready to progress to other material. So the overly simplistic example drops out what's really probably the critical point, which is to develop the skill building. So anyhow, this is purely conceptual in nature. I just want to make it clear when we're talking about principles and examples, what that looks like to us. And typically it's a cyclical process where you hone in on examples that can reach the student so they can fully understand them. But also enough examples so that the student realizes this is not a one-off technique. This is a tool that they can look for in other parts of their training. So the analogy I usually give is every principle is like a new set of eyeglasses. When you learn that principle and some examples, you put on those eyeglasses and then you look at the entire rest of your training and see where that principle can help enhance, fill in any gaps of any other training that you have in your curriculum. So anyhow, let me know if you have any questions about this, and let me know what your thoughts are for filling in some other information that might be helpful. Take care.